Natural philosophy is primarily Platonic, in that it is concerned with the whole, as opposed to the part, realizing that all things are essentially related to certain eternal forms and principles. The approach of the natural philosopher strives to understand the relation that the particular has with the universal. Through the language of natural philosophy, and through the Pythagorean approach to whole systems, it is possible to relate the temporal with the eternal, and to know the organic relation between multiplicity and unity. If the scientific spirit is seen as a desire to study the universe in its totality, it will be seen that both approaches are complementary and necessary in scientific inquiry. For an inclusive cosmology must be equally at home in dealing with the part of the whole, with the part or the whole. The great scientists of Western civilization, Kepler, Copernicus, Newton, Einstein, and those before and after, were able to combine both approaches in a valuable and fruitful way. It is interesting that the split between science and philosophy coincides roughly with the Industrial Revolution, for once freed from the philosophical element, which anchors scientific inquiry to the whole of life and human values. Science ceases to be science in a traditional sense, and is malformed into a servile nursemaid of technology. The development and employment of mechanization. Now, machines are quite useful as long as they are subservient to human good, in all the ramifications of that word, but as it turned out, the Industrial Revolution also coincided with a mechanistic conceptualization of the natural order, which sought to increase material profit at the expense of the human spirit. This era, which gave rise to the nightmare of the modern factory, William Blake's dark satanic mills, gained its strength through the naive premise that the human spirit might be elevated and perfected through the agency of the machine. Today, in many circles, to a large part fueled by the desire for economic reward, science has nearly become confused with and subservient to technology, and from this perspective it might be said that the ideal of a universe or inclusive science has been lost. This is because the ideal scientist is also a natural philosopher, who is interested in relating his discoveries to a larger universal framework, whereas the dull-minded technologist, if he has any interest in universal principles at all, limits that interest to their specific mechanistic applications, rather than their intrinsic worth of study. Yet, those who study universal principles as principles in themselves often find that these principles have many applications in a wide variety of fields. While Pythagoras would have taken a dim view of this artificial and dangerous split between science and philosophy, the negative consequences of this rupture have not gone unnoticed. Yet, with his emphasis on the unity of all life, Pythagoras would have been in an excellent position to foresee the negative consequences: ecological imbalance, materialism, the varied effects of personal greed, the disintegration of human values, the decline of the arts, the lack of personal interest in excellence and achievement. In a sense, these problems, not necessarily unique to this age, result from a lack of balance and an ability to see the parts in relation to the whole. As the poet Francis Thompson said, "You cannot move a flower without troubling a star." And so it is with every individual and collective action. Pythagoras correctly observed that all things are linked together proportionately, by justice, harmony, call it what you will. By cultivating an awareness of harmonic forming principles and working within the bounds set by necessity, mankind possesses the potential to become a sacred steward of the earth and co-creator with nature. But the inevitable corollary is that humanity also has every power to create and inhabit a hell of its own making. The simple fact remains that the scales of justice are inexorable. It is a principle of nature, and not merely of human morals, that each should receive his due. If we poison our rivers, we poison ourselves. If we act in stupidity, it's only appropriate that we suffer the consequences. If there is a moral to the story, it is simply that individuals and societies are far less likely to run into trouble should they possess an awareness of these principles and relationships. And if one would like to cultivate the innate human ability to see things as they are, in whole part relations, there is scarcely a better guide than the Pythagorean sciences. There has been much talk about the avant-garde of whole systems, the philosophy of holism, etc. But few have realized that it is actually Pythagoras who is the tutelary genius and founder of the philosophy of whole systems. We have mentioned the split between science and philosophy because it is an easy and self-evident example. Yet, Pythagoras would also have something to say about the structure of our educational system as well. It has become fashionable to create ever more specialized disciplines. A PhD thesis is considered proportionally better than the fewer the number of people that can understand it. This is not to imply the specialized knowledge lacks value, but rather to say that a danger exists in the self-inflicted alienation of academia and the sciences. Great things cannot fail to happen when minds get together and one mind fertilizes another. When disciplines inspire one another, Pythagoras would say that, from the standpoint of natural philosophy, a superfluous multiplicity of facts and compartmentalized data is useless in a higher sense unless one can determine their relation to the whole or the universal patterns which underlie all creation. Interestingly, it is the modern-day physicists who have come most closely to approximating Pythagorean conceptions. Hell-bent on proving the mechanistic notions of 18th century materialism, physicists have discovered that the deeper they push into matter, the more it looks like the cosmos of the Pythagoreans and Platonists. Each atom is a Pythagorean universe, the site of eternity in a grain of sand, consisting of an arithmetic number of particles, geometrically distributed in spacing, dancing and vibrating like a miniature solar system to the music of the spheres. A modern physicist would have little difficulty comprehending the teaching of the Orphic theologians that the essence of the gods, that is to say, the formative principles, is defined by number. Matter and energy are but different aspects of one underlying continuum. Advancing to the subatomic level, quantity becomes quality, energy becomes information. Many physicists proceeding from particulars to universals are now on the verge of recognizing the essential truth of the statement, common to all spiritual traditions, that through consciousness the universe is but one single thing. All is interdependent with all. The science of physics proceeding from matter to energy, from energy to intelligence, for example, pattern, logos, and from intelligence to nous, has all but discovered the deus absconditus of the alchemists, the god hidden in matter. If the alchemical poeticism be allowed, even matter, if proportionally tortured, slain, and resurrected, contains the innate potentiality of revealing the hermetic mercury of eternal being. With the atomic accelerator at their disposal, modern physicists indeed have the capability to change lead into gold. They have taught the world that flesh, coal, and diamond are made of the same basic stuff, carbon, driving home the reality that soul and form is the essential component of all things. One important Pythagorean insight, which possesses ramifications for both the sciences and human behavior, is the observation that the phenomenal universe is a mixture, synthesis of limited and unlimited events. Plato, drawing upon this notion in the Timaeus, compares the limited world of the forms to a father, and the unlimited receptacle of space to a mother, the nurse of becoming, as he puts it. From their conjunction is born an offspring, the visible phenomenal universe, the world of eternal principles manifesting in time and space. The significance of this observation lies in the fact that it paints a picture of chaos. We exist in an intermediate realm, Platonism, which posits the existence of an extra-temporal and extra-spatial world of perfect form, recognizes that the universe in which we live mirrors this perfection in an imperfect way. Hence, Plato noticed that the Timaeus, that the receptacle of becoming, which we inhabit, was initially filled with powers that were neither alike nor evenly balanced. The receptacle might be compared to a sea, in which various currents provide for an ambient randomness. Stated in the terms of contemporary physics, one might observe that in the intelligible realm, light, as principle, travels in a perfectly straight line, while in the realm of manifestation, its path and the fabric of space itself is warped to a degree by gravitational mass. While the Pythagoreans identified the principle of limit with the good, it should also be observed that without the principle of the unlimited, all manifestation would be impossible. Moreover, working in conjunction with its partner, the principle of unlimitedness is equally responsible for the organic beauty of the phenomenal realm. All trees of the same species, more or less, follow the same laws of growth. But at each juncture of growth, there exists an indefinite number of possibilities. It is precisely the unlimited element which makes for the beauty of a forest, which would be much less beautiful if each tree were exactly the same. A musical composition also relies on order and randomness. Change. Should either element come to predominate, it ceases to be beautiful. Whereas the Platonism before the Renaissance possessed a tendency to focus on the transcendent world of forms. The first Pythagoreans seemed to concentrate more on the incarnate manifestations of universal principles. After all, not only did they study harmonia as a universal principle, seeing it reflected on all levels of the beautiful cosmos, they incorporated the principle into the fabric of their daily lives as well. But already with Aristotle, we find a lack of insight into the Pythagorean view. He cannot understand how the Pythagoreans view number as possessing magnitude. This could well represent a misunderstanding of the incarnationalist dimension of Pythagorean thought, and perhaps reveals an overly literalist interpretation of on Aristotle's part as well. The Pythagorean view of the universe as a living harmonic mixture is not only indispensable as a scientific concept, but it beautifully articulates the position of man in the cosmos as well. If, along with Plato, we view time as a moving image of eternity, then each generation of humanity stands poised between the present moment and the timeless immensity of the eternal, rather than being a worthless speck, meaninglessly situated in the infinite expanse of space. Each person, according to the Pythagorean view, is a microcosm, complete image of the entire cosmos, with one foot located in the realm of eternal principles and the other foot rooted in a particular world of manifestation. Poised, as he is, between time and eternity, matter and spirit, man possesses an incredible freedom to learn, create, and know, limited only by those principles on which creation is based. From this vantage point, humanity is engaged in a never-ceasing dialectic between time and eternity, possessing the ability to incarnate eternal principles in time, and this sense mirror the creative work of nature, yet also possessing the ability to elevate the particular to the universal through conscious understanding. In relation to this theme, one final observation is in order. The creative endeavors of humanity seem to attain their peak of excellence precisely at that point, when the intermediate nature of humanity is actively recognized. For, with this recognition, comes the realization that one must actively integrate the particular and the universal aspects of being. Hence, the best science will once again embrace its sister, philosophia. Both deal with universal principles and particular phenomena, and together they will not attempt to build a system of thought either from the top down, deducted from purely a priori formulations, nor will they dare to stare exclusively from the bottom up, abstracting observations only from particular phenomena while ignoring universal principles. This approach, I believe, is fundamentally Pythagorean. The harmonic proportion, according to legend discovered by Pythagoras, exists as a purely universal principle, but it would have never been discovered without empirical experimentation on a monochord. The value of the harmonic proportion lies in both its universal nature as well as the significance and usefulness of its particular applications. Through the creative dialectic between the temporal and the eternal, there necessarily occurs a form of integration between otherwise purely theoretic and pragmatic approaches. Another benefit of this realization, the realization that all things are composed of constants and variables, is that, if seriously embraced, it actively encourages honest inquiry, rendering the twin dangers of fundamentalism and relativism equally impotent, for universal justice has its own means of dealing with individuals who mistakenly believe that they possess the absolute truth, or conversely think that everything is relative. One final point needs to be made about the Pythagorean approach, and that concerns the topic of value. There are many occasions where it is useful to take a divisive approach to nature for the purposes of abstract analysis. Yet, there are also times when it becomes expedient to stress the unity of all beings. For Aristotle, number was merely an abstraction as opposed to an innately existing a priority, a priori principle. So it is easy to see how he might have become confused by the notion that abstract number possesses magnitude. Yet, if number acts as a geometrical forming principle in the sphere of natural phenomena, as some of the studies cited in the bibliography abundantly demonstrate, it seems unwise to deny its imminent efficacy. Likewise, Aristotle was equally bewildered by the Pythagorean symbolism, which equated certain archetypal number forms with principles such as justice. Yet the truth of the matter is that it is precisely through the Pythagorean approach that quantity, number, and quality are discovered to be integrally related. As Ernst Levi has pointed out in an important article, the Pythagorean concept of measure. This is shown to be especially true in the realm of music, where each tone is actually a number, yet also a qualitative phenomenon possessing value. It is particularly true in the realms of music and what has been called sacred geometry, that one can gain insight into the Pythagorean conception of number as both creative paradigm and qualitative relation. Levi suggests that in order to once again benefit from a unified scientific and philosophical synthesis, that a new mental attitude is required, which many among us will be reluctant to assume, because it is contrary to the scientifically determined mind. The definition of that attitude is simple enough. It consists in this, that we must be willing to ascribe equal reality and equal importance to quality and quantity. It is worth observing that the Pythagorean approach, while realizing the necessity of employing antithetical pairs of opposites in a conceptual sense, always arrives at a position which emphasizes the unity of the all. To conclude that number, in the most Pythagorean sense of the term, and the cosmos itself, possesses a dimension of meaning, is, within the context of mechanistic science or modern reductionistic philosophy, perhaps the ultimate heresy. Yet, for the traditional scientist and philosopher, such a realization is only the starting point. If Pythagoras had but one imperative for the present age, or any age, it would be, as F.M. Concord has suggested, this: seek truth and beauty together. You will never find them apart. David R. Fiddler.